Help support the companies that support our community. I picked this piece of Cholla Cactus up in Arizona at this cool little rock shop. It's called T-Rock. So we were on our way back from our trip to Arizona to the Chandler Woodcraft for the big open house. So it was really cool. It's a cool rock shop in a neat little town. They have a huge festival every year. I cut it a little bit big, just a teeny bit bigger than the mold, so I could actually just kind of push it down in there so it would hold it in the center. And then I mixed up some of the supercast. For the color on this, I used a little bit of red and a little bit of brown dye for that, and then went ahead and filled it all the way up. So the supercast it's a casting resin, but I'm not exactly sure on the volume that you can put in it all at one time. This mold is 4x4x8, and I filled it all the way up, and it kind of it dries so fast. It actually doesn't. It takes like 48 hours for it to dry, but it dries too fast for the mold. So it kind of like sucked down in the corners. It all worked out good, but it's probably a little bit less, maybe 2 or 3 inches is probably what it's meant for. And then obviously here, I didn't have any of the mold release, which I went to Woodcraft and picked some up today. So next time it will pop out of the mold, because it was a pain. And then I went ahead and tilted the table saw over to 45 and cut the corners off. Then I went ahead and drilled in on each side of the blank just a little bit, so that the spur on the live and the drive center would go all the way into it. So I just drilled a small little hole in there. And then when I start turning it, I just used a number 1 hollower, the negative rake cutter. In fact, I used this tool probably 99% of the time. I did use the parting tool once, and then the detailer once too, and all of them are the negative rake, so it works out perfect for doing resin stuff. I just went ahead and trued the blank up, and then went ahead and put a tenon down on one end of it so I could grab it in the chuck. Once I got it in the chuck, I went ahead and started shaping it. So when I lined up the little holes I drilled, I put them right in the center. I knew I wanted to do a vase, and I kind of wanted to hollow out the inside of it right down the tube, because these things are hollow. And the other thing I wanted to do was around the lip and the bottom, expose a little bit of the cactus. So that's kind of what I did. As I started hollowing it out, I realized I couldn't take out too much of the wood because they're not very thick, but that's a little bit later on. I went ahead and just gave it the basic shape, then used a parting tool to part off a little bit of the excess on top before hollowing it out. I used the number 1 hollower to hollow the whole thing out, and the reason I did that is a lot of times I'll use a Forstner bit, but I didn't want to create too much heat with it, and depending on what you're turning, and I haven't drilled out a lot of resin with the Forstner bit, so I just didn't want to chance that, so I went ahead and hollowed the whole thing out. After I got it hollowed out, I went ahead and ran through a couple of grits with dry sandpaper just to clean it up a little bit, and then I switched over and just started sanding it with regular water. So I went ahead and did a grit, and then I ran like with the grain and then against the grain, and I went back and forth, and I went all the way up to 320 with just plain water, and then I switched over and used the Yorkshire grit. So I used the regular Yorkshire grit first after the 320 sandpaper, and then I switched over and did the micro. And this stuff is meant for resin. So with this stuff, you just kind of rub it on with the lathe off, rub it around for a minute or two, just kind of work it into it, and then you turn the lathe on. So I turned it on pretty slow to start out with, maybe 300 or so, just kind of work it in like sandpaper, and then I bump the lathe speed up, and I just keep working it around. It takes a few minutes to get it to shine up, and it breaks down the material that's in the Yorkshire grit, and then I went ahead and wiped it off with sandpaper. So I ran through all of that, switched over and did the microfine. The same process with that. I just went ahead and rubbed it into the piece, and then turned the lathe on and started polishing it, and it brings it up to a nice polish. After I got that sanded, I took it out of the chuck and went ahead and flipped it around. So you might have seen me, I use this cone that goes on the live center quite a bit. I use it for different projects, but it also goes onto the spur center. So this thing is really kind of versatile. So I went ahead and put that on the spur center, just put a paper towel over it, put the mouth of the vase over it, and then brought the tailstock up because I still have that center point, and went ahead and turned the foot off. And with this part, it's the same process. I went ahead and turned off the material, dry sanded it a couple of times, and then went ahead and sanded it with water, and then went right back through with the regular Yorkshire grit and the fine. So with something like this, because I'd already sanded it, each grit I used, I went a little bit further up the piece. So by the time I was done, I was basically right back to polishing, almost right up to the neck of it when I was done with the super fine grit. After I had it all polished up, I went ahead and pulled it off of the lathe and just sanded up that little spot where the spur center was, and I just hand sanded that and went through the whole same process with that. Wet sanded it and used the Yorkshire grit on the bottom of it as well. There we go, I got it all done. It's 7 inches tall and just under 4 inches in diameter. So with the super cast stuff, I would probably pour it like halfway full and wait 24 hours and then pour the rest of it in there. So it has a little bit of time to cure, because I've poured different things with it. Like the martini glass, it was at least 2 inches thick, and it didn't have any problem curing at all. There was no issues with it as far as it cracking or anything. But this one, I'll show a close-up picture here, but there is when I was hollowing it out, I was working the tool, and all of a sudden it would start to chatter. I'd turn the lathe off. I looked down there, and there was a crack on the inside of it. So when it's that thick, it can't, you know, cure or whatever sort of chemical reactions going on inside of there. It can't release that pressure on it, so it's heating it up on the inside. So one of them, there's actually like a little slice coming through it where you can see where it cracked. Also, the other thing is I didn't stabilize it. I just threw it in the mold. This stuff is super cool. So all I did with it was cut a chunk off, and I took it in the house and with an old toothbrush and cleaned out, because there's little bits of just everything inside of it. But it's super neat. I've seen stuff done with it with pins and things like that. I've had this for, well, going on a year now. Yeah, our last trip in the mold shop, that's when we got it. So it was like, I think it was February when I got it. But it's super neat stuff. And it even though I didn't stabilize it, it came out cool. It's just neat stuff. It's so as I was hollowing it out too, so I started to cut into the wood on this side of it, and because it's so thin, I didn't want to keep going to hollow it out even more, because it would have taken all of that away and you wouldn't be able to see it from the outside. But super neat stuff. I got my can of stoner, so the next time I do something in a mold, I'm going to spray this stuff on it. That mold I was using, it's meant to you're just supposed to take off one end of it, and the mold, and it should pop right out. But it obviously I had to beat on it to get it out of there. I had to take off the back side of it, which it's all, you know, caulked together. It's not meant to come apart like that. So I will spray that, and it will be good to go. But yeah, excited to try and do something else with it. On the next one, I will definitely just pour half of it, wait overnight, and then pour the other half of it, and hopefully that will eliminate that overheating problem. One other thing, we got the virtual craft festival coming up tomorrow, so I will put a link down below in the description to the website. If you follow me on Facebook, I put up a post yesterday about that, and it has the lineup of everybody. We got some great people again, so some different stuff. Marcy's going to be there doing some paint pouring. We have a glass blower, just a bunch of people, but go check it out and see who's going to be on there and what time they're going to be on. All right, I think that's it for this one. All right. Hope to see you tomorrow on the craft festival. You can join anytime throughout the day. There's a bunch of different people doing different things. So hopefully I'll see you there, and if not, we'll see you next week. All right, take care.